If you're like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing this, that's the exact reason why you should do it, because that's where growth happens.
Pat Flynn, the host of the Smart Passive Income podcast, which is a top podcast with 50 million downloads. You're a YouTuber with almost 500,000 subscribers now. Of course, you run the SBI community, where I'm a proud expert in residence. What would you say was your biggest turning point as an entrepreneur?
Every stage has like a boss, like in a video game. And when you defeat that boss, then you get to the next level.
At what point did you realize, I want to be recognized as a leading voice in my industry?
This was 2011. I had been asked dozens of times to come on stages, and I immediately defaulted to no.
You feel the nerves, and that's excitement.
If I'm not nervous before I do something like a stage talk, that's when I'm the most nervous.
How important do you think being visible is for an entrepreneur? Pat, the best-selling author of 3 books with a 4th one in the works, the host of Smart Passive Income podcast, which is a top podcast with 50 million downloads. You're a YouTuber with 500,000 subscribers, and of course you run the SBI community, where I'm a proud expert in residence. Before we dive in, I have a question to ask you. Are you part of my newsletter? Because I think you'll get a lot of value from it. It's called Speak as a Leader, and every Sunday I share real actionable tips and insights on how you can speak with more confidence, clarity, and impact, so you speak like the thought leader you really are. Just go to speaking.coach to sign up. See you Sunday. Hey, Pat. How are you doing?
Hey, Nausheen, I'm doing excellent, and even better now because we get to chat.
Awesome. So what I really want to talk to you about is, how did you build influence? How did you go from a nobody to a somebody? And how can everyone else do that? You've really built yourself from scratch, from getting laid off to starting your own website, doing an ebook, doing a blog, and then building your entire business. So my first question to you is, you've had many turning points over your career. What was the biggest turning point for you as an entrepreneur?
There's a lot of turning points for sure. I feel like every stage has like a boss, like in a video game. And when you defeat that boss, then you get to the next level. And then there's new challenges, and then there's a new boss, and that then gets you to the next level. And each of those quote unquote bosses becomes a turning point. And the first one was, I was in the architecture world for a while, and I had gotten laid off in 2008 during the Great Recession and was struggling to figure out what to do next. And that's when I started to build my first online business, which was to help people pass an architectural exam. So that was the first big turning point. And then in 2010, I started my podcast. So the podcast quickly grew, became a #1 podcast in business. And then I started to have people in a magnetic kind of way come to me and say, how did you start your podcast? Can you show me how to do that? One of those people was Tim Ferriss. He went to me and asked me for some help on how to start a podcast, how to launch a podcast. And many people know Tim Ferriss's show now and listen to it. And hundreds of millions of people have tuned into his show.
I love that we're diving into thought leadership, because from what I understand, you've built thought leadership very organically over a period of time. You took the long way around. You didn't take any shortcuts. At what point did the thought leadership become intentional? Was there a point where you realized, I do want to be recognized as a leading voice in my industry?
Actually relates to 2011. I was asked to speak on stage at my first event. And this was an ask by one of my friends, Philip Taylor. Up until that point, I had been asked dozens of times to come on stages, and I immediately defaulted to no. So this was the first time I was like, okay, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was deathly afraid, and I read books like Stand and Deliver by Dale Carnegie. So my very first talk was a closing keynote at a large conference, which scared me even more. So I put even more work into this, and I memorized an entire 20-page script of things to say. I've learned since then to not do that. You lose a lot of opportunity for organic moments in presentations when you script the whole thing, and it can sound very robotic. And I did, in my opinion, sound pretty robotic, but I went up there despite the fear and had so many people immediately after tell me that it was probably the most useful thing they learned at the conference. And the talk was about how to stand out in a crowded space. I immediately knew, like, wow, by being intentional about wanting to help people and then receiving that feedback immediately after, even though I had a podcast, I'm going to be more intentional with it. I'm going to think about writing books soon, which I eventually did. I was kind of, like you said, just kind of scrappy and organically putting things together. It was in 2011, after that stage talk, doing something that I completely feared, that I then discovered that I can be intentional in it, can pay off, and everybody can win.
I love that link between not just being an influencer, but actually making sure that you have the expertise. And in fact, what you said about hesitating and saying no, this is what my clients tell me all the time. In fact, this is why I get hired, because I have people coming to me and saying, Nausheen, I'm an expert. I've been doing this for decades, but I don't feel comfortable saying yes to this podcast. I don't feel comfortable saying yes to this speaking opportunity. The best way to do it is exactly what you did, which is say yes first. You say yes while you're still scared, and then you practice the crap out of it. You make sure that you know your content inside out. You're always going to be nervous. And I'm sure you feel the nerves, right? Before big events, you feel the nerves. That's excitement.
I was so proud. That was a long time coming, and Seth is a big hero of mine. So I was up all night the night before, in bed, thinking about what that conversation would be like and visualizing the conversation. And it turned out so well. But if I'm not nervous before I do something like that, or a stage talk, that's when I'm the most nervous. That's when I feel like, oh no, I'm in a complacency mode. I'm too comfortable. Like your clients say, it's like, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing this. That's the exact reason why you should do it, because that's where growth happens. That's where rapid learning happens.
Yeah. And if you're comfortable all the time, you're actually doing yourself a disservice by not pushing yourself to grow. So I love that we're already talking about public speaking, because of course that's what my whole life is centered around these days. So I want to dive straight into the public speaking aspect of it. So before we dive into the strategies that you might have used to deal with the nerves, because I know people want to hear about that, first I want to tell you a story. It's a little bit harrowing. I had a coach approach me once. She had been a career coach for many, many years. She'd worked her ass off. She had helped many, many people. And she said, Nausheen, I still need to justify my prices on sales calls. I still need to convince people to work with me. I'm so tired of not being credible, not being an authority in my industry. I'm tired of people not wanting to immediately work with me because of the influence that I have. And her dream was to get on the TED stage and build thought leadership. So we started working together. In the second week, I got a call from her saying that, Nausheen, I can't believe how bad things are. I was at the supermarket and I couldn't pay for my groceries, so I have to stop the coaching program, just go back to basics and figure out how to get back on my feet. And it was chilling for me to hear that story, because that's the difference between someone who just puts their head down and does the best work that they can, helps as many people and as many clients as they can, but they haven't built thought leadership. They haven't built that one thing that would attract new clients to come to them versus them having to go out and find clients over and over. The reason why I bring this story up is because there are a lot of people, a lot of experts who are now starting their businesses, and they're in a position where they have to figure out, how much time do I dedicate to being visible, to marketing myself, to being on podcasts, building thought leadership, speaking at conferences, versus just delivering the service that I want to deliver? What would you say to that? Is that something that you ever considered?
Thought leadership is important because it positions me as a person to trust and a person of expertise to be able to serve an audience in whatever way they want to be served. If it's for learning how to start a podcast, cool. Then my podcast page, there's information there about the course, yes, but without a level of, okay, well, who's teaching this and how qualified are they and can I trust them? And social proof, have other people gone through this too? It's going to be a lot harder to sell. There's a lot of things that are more tactical that can help, such as, having really, really amazing testimonials on your sales pages, or having really good case studies to share about how you've helped somebody who is so perfectly in aligned with what their challenges once were, and look at their transformation now, that before and after, and then you have some way, shape, or form to get that story in front of others. Because when people hear that transformational story of somebody just like them and look at where they are now, everybody wants to go to the same place. What I've learned is having a platform to share those case studies and stories on has become key. And so, for example, on the podcast, I'll invite students often on the show and not ask them questions like, why is my course the best course? Or why is working with me the best thing that you've ever done? I ask questions like, what was the struggle before? They share that struggle in their own words, and they start to share words that then the audience can reflect on and go, that's me too. And your students, your customers, your members can sell your thing way better than you ever could, even if you hired the best copywriters in the world.
I definitely feel that distaste for selling.
Yeah, I need to take a bath after like a campaign sometimes, it feels like.
I love the approach that you take because it's so transparent and people see it. People really respect that transparency and that honesty because they can see through it when it's fake. I don't know why, but from a very young age, I've always been very attracted to the idea of building your reputation. It was probably my mom who told me that your reputation precedes you. And whatever you do, don't ever, ever risk your reputation. In fact, build your reputation intentionally. And every time I've followed that approach, it's opened doors for me. It's actually helped me move to different countries and start different businesses from scratch. And it's difficult being an entrepreneur in your home country where you have a network. But starting a business in a place where no one knows you, that's where building your network, but building your influence and reputation, that's what really matters. And that's the same approach that I had for LinkedIn, where I first worked on building my reputation and then I sold something. I didn't sell first, but from what I understand, this is an atypical approach. Most entrepreneurs seem to want to get sales first and then build their authority and do marketing for their reputation. What would you say is a better approach? Putting your head down, building your business, or building your authority and being visible? Ever wonder why some people seem to be naturally confident speakers? People like Obama, Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, they all seem to be so confident and poised when they speak anywhere. I'm here to tell you, you can learn how to do that and more. My free newsletter every Sunday shows you exactly how you can impress every time you speak. Just go to speaking.coach to join us. And now, let's get back to the conversation.
I mean, building reputation and a level of presence online is, I think, important these days. And it all really stems down to the who part. Who is it that you're serving? I think a lot of people make the mistake of, before even these questions that you just asked, is they just kind of dive right in versus, okay, who am I serving and how might I be able to help them? What I would obsess over is, who is it that you're serving? Like, niche down. The riches are in the niches. And then understand everything you can about them. Have conversations with them. What are their struggles? But not just what are their struggles. How do they talk about those struggles? Where do those struggles come from? What are the obstacles that are stopping them from overcoming those struggles? And the more that you can deeply understand that, the better off you'll be. Again, as long as you can show that what it is that you're doing for somebody else is of service to them, you're helping them save time, you're making something more convenient for them, you're helping them accomplish something that they weren't able to do without you, that is worth charging for. As you are building your presence somewhere, and that's the other component of this, is I think a lot of people assume that you have to be everywhere. You just have to be in one spot. I love that you chose LinkedIn for 6 months and just focused on that and build trust there, and look at what it's done for you now. Now, the long game, you can kind of, do a lot there, which is incredible. You've built a lot of authority, and you don't need authority on all the platforms to have authority. Just go to where your target audience is and then understand them, learn about them, like I said, and you can kind of make use of that in a way where, again, when you serve first, your earnings become a byproduct of that. That's the way that I've always approached it.
And I love that you brought up referrals, not just referrals in the official sense of the term, but word of mouth, people talking about you. That's what you want. You want people to tell stories about you. And that's something that I see a lot of people either get wrong or take too long to do in terms of building that visibility. So we've been talking about two things. One is having one-on-one conversations with prospects, for example, where you don't necessarily need to have visibility. But then how do you get those sales calls in the first place? You have to build visibility. You have to get out there. Coming to the public speaking aspect of it. And by public speaking, I don't necessarily just mean speaking on a stage, but also speaking like this on a podcast, doing webinars, doing live events. A lot of people hesitate because a lot of them start with writing text posts on LinkedIn or X, and then they just stop there. There's a plateau. So how important do you think breaking that plateau is, getting out from the text post and getting in front of a camera? How important is that?
I mean, like I said earlier, people connect with other people, and the more that you could show up as a real life human with real emotions and connections to a certain group of people, the more likely you're going to be followed, and the more likely you'll be an influencer in a positive sense. You have to show up in order to have people come and follow the work that you're doing. You have to show up. In the beginning, reps is important. Quantity is, in fact, more important than quality in the beginning. And any opportunity you get in front of people, it's important to learn how to also shape those words into stories that really capture attention. Every platform is different. On YouTube, you have to understand, for example, how to create a great title and thumbnail to capture people's attention. That is the specific motive of getting most people on to your videos, is a title and thumbnail combination that works. So obsess over that, because on that platform is absolutely key. On LinkedIn, you have some tips, I'm sure, that are different than YouTube. And then if you're on X, it's different. If you are on TikTok, it's in short form video, it's absolutely different. You have 2 seconds to create a hook, and then you have them for a little bit longer after that. So whatever platform it is, you have to learn how those platforms work, but then you can begin to inject your values and your message in there. And it's not, again, just talking about information, but it's the way you talk about it, the stories that you tell. Again, how often you show up for people so that they can begin to go, oh, I really like this person because they understand me. When you focus your level of success on the actions that you are taking, you will win no matter what. And what's an interesting phenomenon that happens is when you focus on that, just simply the action, you don't worry about the numbers so much. You are learning from them, but you're not like, oh, I'm a failure because this video flopped. Those videos will do very well. You'll begin to start to see numbers grow. You'll begin to start to see patterns and begin to learn because of all those reps you're taking. So base your success on the actions you are taking, not on the results that those actions have, because you can't control those results all the time, but you can control you stepping forward to hit publish despite being scared so that you can learn and grow from it.
I love that you're bringing in the reps and the aspect of control, because I always tell my clients, you're the one in control. If you're the one who's speaking, if you're the one who has the mic or the stage, you're in control. You have to seize that control. When I first started doing all my brand building on LinkedIn, I started getting invites on podcast. At that point, I had been speaking on stages for decades, but I had never done a podcast. So I said yes to every single podcast for 6 months, where I was just heads down building my brand. And I did all kinds of podcasts. I didn't even bother looking at the profile of the host or the podcast show. I just wanted to make sure that I was as effective and impactful as I could be in this new medium. So that stress on quantity versus quality, or quantity in addition to quality, is so important. So last question for you. You shared with us that at one point you had stage fright. You were nervous. You were scared of being on stage. And at one point you got over it. So how did you build on your speaking skills? Was it intentional or did it just happen?
It was definitely intentional. I immediately hired a coach. That was the next thing I did. I had put in an application to speak at Blog World Expo, or I think it was New Media Expo. It changed its name the next year. And I got accepted. And I was like, okay, I want to nail this talk. And so I hired a coach, Mike Pacquione, who worked with me and taught me so many things. First of all, taught me that I should not script at all. So I worked with him, did a few more presentations. Then my goal whenever I do anything is trying to be an innovator in the space, even early on, try to do something new, trying to do something novel. So I started to develop a style, my own style. This only comes with reps and doing it, developing your own style of talk. My style of talk for these kinds of presentations is to have an image with maybe 1 or 2 words that supports the next section that I'm going to be talking about. And then it's just me telling a story. The slide is irrelevant at that point. It's just a supporting cast. It's just I want the attention on me, and then going, okay, if attention is on me because I'm using the slides in this way and it's more interactive, how might I be able to enhance that engagement? So really going into, okay, understanding timing and punchlines and all these kinds of things, getting really deep into it. I practice this thing called micro mastery, which means like when I'm doing something, I take one component of it and just try to master that one component. I've just fallen in love with the idea that every talk is a new challenge to me. Again, trying to become the top voted speaker in any conference I'm at. And that's how I've been able to get more talks.
I love that. Question. What would you suggest for someone who's just starting out?
I think the most important thing is to pick a target audience. Doesn't matter what you're trying to do, right? If you're trying to get on a stage, if you're trying to build authority on something, if you're trying to build a following somewhere, like pick a group of people that you want to show up for and serve. Like the riches are in the niches. You could start there. It doesn't mean you're always going to do that. So the more you deep dive into who it is that you're serving and what their problems and challenges are, that's where I would start. Pick a target market, determine if it's niche enough. If it's not, go a little bit more niche, and then create a spreadsheet of things like, here are where all those people go. Like, here are the websites they visit, here are the communities they're a part of, here are the conferences they go to. Like, this is what I call my market map, the 3 Ps. Places. Then you make a list of all the people. Who are the already existing influencers in that space? Who have the top Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok accounts? These are the people who have already earned the trust with that particular audience. And then number 3 is, what are all the products that those people are buying? That's where I would begin. It's all customer psychology and customer focused first.
Stalk your ideal client. Make sure that you know who they are. And we didn't get a chance to really talk about this in detail, but then there's also authority by association, right? So if you can figure out a way to associate yourself with someone in power, maybe you can tell us a little about that.
Yeah. So like if you have a platform and you invite a person on who is an expert, you are immediately now associated with them. A good example of this was John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. He started his podcast simply as a way to daily interview other successful entrepreneurs. By just association with those people who were on his show, he himself has gained authority and has been seen as a trusted thought leader just simply by being an expert curator of people. And that is something that is of value, because when you think about it, that's one way of providing value. Who else spoke on the same stage that you spoke on? Like if I told you that I spoke on the same stage as Peyton Manning, a famous football player here in the US, it says something. I never met him. I didn't cross paths with him because we spoke on different days, but I was at the same conference speaking on the same stage that he did. Now, as a result, I have a little bit more authority because not everybody has a chance to do that. So that's kind of what Nausheen and I are talking about here.
Question from our community. Sylvia asks, I'm a full-time employee. Long story short, I'm not allowed to sell any service while I'm in my 9 to 5, but I see that a big part of my engagement around the topic that I'm connected to is because my authority is linked to my corporate identity. So she's wondering how to transfer that authority that she has right now into the entrepreneurial venture that she hopes to launch.
Well, her follow-up question here is, I'm simply afraid that when I leave the 9 to 5, my reputation as having work in that space or having some authority in that space will drop. But what if it was the opposite? What if when you leave that 9 to 5, you will now have more freedom and authority to go even bigger, right? So it could go either way. It would give you more freedom to talk about it and even, promote some things related to that. But I wouldn't be afraid of that. I think that what I would do, however, is still you can build your platform and build your reputation on the knowledge and the things that you're capturing in your 9 to 5 job. And who knows, you might get hired at a even more prestigious place afterwards, in which case that authority actually is what helped you get there, because you are open and you are forthcoming with how you have this clear and unique positioned understanding inside of the space. There could also be some interesting things, like, for example, if I didn't get laid off, but I still had knowledge about this exam that architects were taking, I could probably work with my company that I was working at to partner and sell and kind of have my own thing that was sort of in addition to what my company was already doing. It kind of complements it, and we could even license that out to other architecture firms too. There's a lot of different ways that you could take that knowledge and service other people, but not other people, just other businesses as well. So I think there's some huge opportunities there. And I think if you can open up those lines of communication with that company so that there's an understanding and that you're not doing things you shouldn't, but that also there's opportunities to work together, I think there's a lot of cool things that could be done.
Yeah. And 2 things come to mind. One is you can absolutely leverage the experience that you've had as an entrepreneur. So I leverage my Procter & Gamble experience all the time, especially when I'm speaking to corporate audiences. That's the first thing I mention. I'm from the corporate world. I know what you're going through. And your own trajectory, it shows very clearly that in the corporate world, you do have a ceiling on the impact that you can make. You have a podcast that has millions and millions of downloads, but you may not have been able to do that if you were still in the corporate world. So speaking for myself and lots of people, we're actually thrilled that you got laid off because of all the awesome things that you did with your life after that. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us, Pat.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing everything so honestly and generously.
My pleasure. I'll see you in SPI.
Take care. Bye. Hey, you're still here. Thanks for listening all the way till the end. I'm super grateful for your support. If you liked the episode, please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars on the platform that you're listening on. It would mean the world to me, and it will help more people discover Speak as a Leader. To know more about how I help leaders speak fearlessly, just go to Nausheen.com. That's N for Nausheen and Sheen like Martin and Charlie. See you in the next episode. Till then, speak fearlessly.